Why are modes so confusing? That's what we're looking at today. We're going to go through the history of modal theory, and I'm going to do my best to explain modes in the simplest way I possibly can. Oh boy. We are going to cut a lot of corners here for the sake of my own sanity, but it will all make sense in the end, I promise. Okay? Here we go. The history of modal theory is ridiculous and confusing. If you think it's complicated now, buddy, you have no idea. It could be a lot worse. The modes, or harmoniae, were created in ancient Greece, which is why they all have Greek-sounding names. You can think of these modes as tuning guides for the two most prominent string instruments of the time, the kithara and the lyra. Fast forward a bit and the names of these modes were being used to categorize Gregorian chants, and early modal theorists kind of got carried away with all the categorizing. It's like now when we have arguments about what genre or what specific subgenre a piece of music is, which is crazy because musicians and songwriters don't think about genre when they're writing music. They just sort of write it. Up until the Renaissance, there was almost no agreement about how many modes there were, what order they should appear in, and upon what note each mode should be based. And you know what else? Pitches were different back then compared to what we have now, and the size of intervals were different as well, because they weren't using equal temperament like good boys. From the Renaissance onwards, we basically decided not to bother with the whole modes thing and would just write music in major and minor, more or less. I've skipped over a lot of detail there and I've made some sweeping generalizations because the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't matter. I just want you to know that there's never really been a consensus on what the modes are, let alone what they're for. So I don't want you to ever feel like you're going to use the modes incorrectly because there will be some dingus in a toga who agrees with you. There's one big change that's happened comparatively recently, and that is that now we basically agree on what the modes are, and we agree that you can play any mode starting on any pitch. And that might sound super obvious, but actually, given modal history, that's a pretty big deal. Oh, and we have equal temperament, which is pretty great. So now that we all feel nice and stupid, I'm going to get into my guaranteed problem-free way of conceptualizing the modes that I wish someone had told 17-year-old me when I was trying to tap into the brain of Joe Satriani. There are 7 notes in a major scale. We're going to go with C major today for the sake of simplicity, but it works with all of them. Here is a full octave of C major. If you play those 7 notes but in a different order, for example you start and finish on the 6th degree of the scale, you get a different sounding scale, and your emotional reaction to that scale is different. It's the same 7 notes as C major, but now you have A minor. We say that C major and A minor are relative major and minor scales. We can also say that A minor is the 6th mode of C major. You can start and end on any of the notes within C major. If you start on D, it's D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian or A minor, and B Locrian. And then you go back to C Ionian. Hey, it's Liam from the future. I just wanted to get out in front of something. Ionian is what we call the major scale in the context of the modes, right? And Aeolian is what we call the minor scale when we're talking about modes. Some people will tell you that Ionian and major are different things. You can ignore them. Seriously, I'm giving you permission to ignore those people. For understanding the basics of modal theory, that is not helpful. And also, just by the way, saying things like Ionian and major are different, that's why people talk about us when we're not in the room. Guitarists are not popular. People don't like us because of things like that, okay? Stop it. That is how the modes are created, and that really is all the information you need about the modes. How the modes are applied, how you actually use them, is a separate set of information that for some reason gets lumped in with modal theory and makes the whole thing super confusing, which is why most people just get put off the modes. The reality is, the information on how to use the modes isn't exclusive to the modes. It applies to all scales from anywhere. I'll explain. When you write a piece of music, you tend to put it in either a major or a minor key, don't you? But you don't have to. You could put it in any of the modes. You could put it in harmonic major, harmonic minor. You could put it in a chromatic scale. You could write your piece of music in Eastern pentatonics. You can do anything you please because you're the composer. That is your call as the composer.
Hey Liam, so you've made it pretty clear that as composers and as guitarists improvising, we get to decide what scales we use, what modes we use when we modulate, you know, yada yada yada. It's all great stuff, champ. But can you give us some information about how to actually do any of those things, please? Yes, I can. It's a question of consonance and dissonance.
Most of the time, we want music to sound good, consonance, so we avoid notes that clash or sound bad together, dissonance. When you're choosing what notes to play in your guitar solo, you, by and large, want to make sure that these notes are in consonance with everything else that's going on. Let's say you're playing a guitar solo over an A minor chord. Typically you'd play the A minor scale, right? The Aeolian mode. The notes of the A minor chord, A, C and E, the root, minor, third and fifth, are included in A Aeolian, so it wouldn't sound clashy if you played these together. You could also play the modes A Dorian and A Phrygian because those modes also contain the same notes from the A minor chord. Well, what about A Locrian? Well, A Locrian would sound clashy every time you play E flat, the flat fifth. The chord of A minor has a perfect fifth, E. So if you wanted it to sound clashy, then brilliant. But most of the time, you probably don't want it to sound clashy.
Well, that all sounds simple enough, but why do we think of modes as this big, unknowable, scary thing then? Well, I don't know for certain, but my theory is this. Humans like to put things in categories, but that isn't how music works. The purpose of scales is the same as the purpose of modes. You can swap between them as much as you like, but it's important that you're able to describe what is going on to the people who are playing your composition. We use shorthands like Phrygian because that name is more evocative than saying minor scale with a flat 2.
The modes have been one of the most convoluted subjects out there for guitarists, and for me personally it took me way longer than it should have to understand them. Folks told me that I needed to understand the history of the modes in order to play them, which I think, as we covered in the first half of this video, just isn't true. My goal with videos like this is to make music accessible and combat gatekeeperiness, which is something guitarists seem to really enjoy. For me, the modes are fascinating because modulating between modes and scales sounds awesome and provides a much greater degree of expression than playing diatonically. The hardest part of playing the modes is the very first step, where you've got to get out of that diatonic box-shaped scale headspace and allow yourself to play whatever notes you feel like playing in the moment. That is truly is the hardest bit. So my advice to players who are maybe starting out with the modes, maybe they don't know where to begin, maybe it's a little bit scary at first, my advice is this: pick a scale, start the scale on a different note. This video could have been 7 words long. There's nothing in here, see? Nothing.
If you have any questions about the modes or music composition, music theory, do feel free to leave them in the comments section below. That's what it's for. I will answer basically any questions I can. If you have suggestions for future videos, again, put them in the comments section. If you want more music composition stuff, click on any of the videos on screen right now and I will see you there.